pleasure to be here. The topic is data democratization, just to clarify that. But before I start, I do want to ask a question. How many of you would want to change the country in which we live from a democracy to, let's say, a dictatorship or a totalitarian organization? Anybody raise hands? There's actually somebody raising hand that side. But the question is, yeah, none of us want to be there, right? Not all of us want to have power in our hands. All of us wants to make our own decisions. The question is, I'm not talking about politics here. The topic is data democratization. But the question is, why is it relevant for analytics world? The reason for that is simple. If you look at the analytics world today, it isn't dramatically different. If you look at around 8 to 10% of employees in an organization generate 98% of data analytics related activities. If that's not dictatorship, then what it is? Let's take the Nook one. 87% of the people generate almost all the data which is generated in an organization for all of you to generate insights on, but they don't know anything about data at all, or they don't know anything about data analytics at all. So do we want to be in that world? And therefore, today what I'm going to talk to you about is that how can you change that? How can you make data democratization as a competitive differentiator for your organization? And therefore, you can turn an organization from an organization which generates insights to an insights-driven ecosystem, right? That is what the whole objective is, and that would be a competitive differentiator. Well, talking about insights, of course, we heard a lot of debate. I was speaking to a whole bunch of people today. The question is, the big debate is, what's the future of AI? That's a big debate. It's a big question. There's one more mundane thing in the industry which people ask a lot of questions about is what is an insight? Right? We talk about insights every day. I'm sure all of you have been in business meetings in which the business person is telling you, hey, I have this tons of data with me. Can you generate insights? And I'm sure you are thinking that, what insight? What problem I'm trying to solve for, right? So finding the insight which you are going to do is itself a critical one. So therefore, what is an insight today? I mean, let's take maybe a few examples. Let's take the banks, okay? Now, today, banks, insights are about where are my loan applications originating, which demographics, which country, which state. We would like to think it's insights, but that was insight of the 1980s. Today, the insight which the banks really need is 11% of the business can actually be lost to competitor if you are not prioritizing the ones which we need to be processed first, and then define which of the ones you want to really go after first. The first-in, first-out model of processing applications does not work. But hey, what? 68% of the banks still use first-in, first-out, and therefore leaving a lot of money and competition at the table. Let's move to the world of finance, right? Let's take invoice processing. In finance, everyone loves invoice processing. What do we talk about insights? We talk about, how many invoices am I processing? What has been the rate of it? What is the productivity? But is that an insight again? The insight maybe is the fact that 25% of all invoices are actually paid late. And as a result, we are leaving around 15 to 17% of the early payments discount, which you can capture if you pay early. That is the insight, because that insight translates into millions of dollars for bottom line savings. So let's take the insurance world, right? In insurance world, people talk about how much, when I'm receiving a lot of insurance quotes, from which area, how many quotes am I placing? But again, the insight there is if you are not able to process the quote in the first 24 to 48 hours, there is a higher probability of that being lost to competition. So 30 to 40% probability will go up if you're able to process the application at the right amount of time. So therefore, prioritization becomes very, very critical, right? That's the insight. Let's take one last example. Consumer goods. We all talk about supply chain. We all know supply chain has an issue, but it's not about how many orders you're receiving. It's actually about, given the world of imperfect supply chain, and given the fact that you are receiving orders which can't be fulfilled, how do you identify orders which you can maybe make a switch and therefore allow the customer to get a different product but not lose on the sale? That is the insight. But to be very honest, the topic about insight, I didn't want to talk so much about insight specifically on this. The one insight I wanted to leave behind with this is, What if I told you, if you look at all these insights, right, why are there insights? They are counterintuitive. Most importantly, they have value because they are actionable. Using this action, you can create a value. Using this value, we were talking about MVPs in the previous presentation. Using this value, you can create a bunch of MVPs and drive a lot of experiments. But that is not the true insight. What if I told you that these insights were actually not generated by some data scientist team, were actually generated by people in operations without the help of data scientists? That is the insight. Are you guys feeling the pressure? Maybe not yet. Maybe not yet. But that is what data democratization can do for you. For a long period of time, we have thought about data democratization as something about providing information in the hand of users, like I was talking about. But unfortunately, in this world of post-pandemic, fluctuating supply chain, increasing interest rate, God knows what else, that is not sufficient for you to win against competition. What you really need is the ability of not just 10% people or 20% people generating insights for you, but the whole ecosystem generating insights for you in a manner in which they are able to identify the problems which solve their specific business context. And that is the aim of data democratization. Now, why do organizations don't do it today? All of us have data. All of us have nice platforms, some platform or the other to use it today. But we are still unable to do it for the simple reason that we are not set up like that. 80% of the people in the company actually have no say in designing and building on these insights. And that is the reason you are not able to get to data democratization. So at Genpact, we thought, let's change the game on its head. Why do we not just, while we have a fantastic analytics organization, why don't we ensure that every person in the organization can generate the insights which is needed? Now, that was the genesis of that. 18 months ago, we thought about this program to create the largest data literate base in the world of one organization. Amresh, who was the keynote here, he and I decided that that's the vision for us. I must say that was on around copious amount of wine, with Amresh doing most of the drinking, not me so much. But the reality was that was the objective. Now, and therefore, that was the genesis of what we call as the Data Bridge program. As the name suggests, it's about bridging the gap between an operator, a business user, to an analytics person and bringing all of them together. That was the focus of the Data Bridge program. Now, if you look at it historically, what Genpact has done is we have had a great history of Lean Six Sigma, right? We have been very, very good at solving problems. We believe we have democratized Lean Six Sigma way before where people did. Most of our operators on the ground today are extremely fluent with Lean Six Sigma. What we tend to do is we find a problem. Once we find the problem, we are able to solve it through root cause analysis, fishbone, what else? We know all the tools about that. We thought, why don't we switch the problem on its head? Why don't we enable our business teams to be able to predict before the problem happens? Right? Any kind of defect. Why do we always have to solve a problem after it has happened? Why can't it be solved before it has happened? And therefore, the concept of prediction comes into play. And therefore, we thought, if we are able to convert our entire ecosystem of operations into citizen insight certification, right? We have the history, our green belt, black belt certifications have a lot of demand in the industry. People look for it, people are very, very focused about it. And we said, why don't we take this on? Why won't we convert this certification and the training engine which we have into citizen insight generation so that they can drive some of the impact and some of the insights we talked about? Now, that was the focus of this. The interesting thing about when we started on this program, we started about this as great. Genpact is not a small place, right? It's not 5,000 people sitting in one location and driving it fairly homogeneous. It was a massive task for us. We have around 100 delivery centers, 120,000 employees across the globe, 30 different countries, 700 different clients. It was not homogeneous by any such imagination. So whatever we design, we had to ensure that kind of meets the objective and the focus of each one of them. And that, I think, was the essence of the program. So if you look at it, we were facing two kind of challenges. Challenge number one, how do we get the businesses on the ground to be fluent with data so much that they can generate the insights which they are comfortable with and drive value for their customers? At the same time, how do we make this program important enough, wide enough, attractive enough to this kind of scale and this kind of variation, right? Classical Six Sigma, reduced variation. This was the variation we were dealing with. And that was how I think the program kind of really made it challenging for us. So what we did was we said, okay, by the way, industry doesn't have anything like that. So the first thing we went is, like everyone does, go to Google, go to our partners. Guys, have you done anything like this ever? So you speak to all of my fellow chief data officer, data scientists, say, yeah, data literacy is a big problem for all of us. So how many people have you trained? 200 people we have trained. I said, okay, great. We go to another people. Okay, how many people have you trained? We have trained 500 people, and they're very proud about it. And I said, that's not relevant for us. Our ambition is to train 120,000 people, growing at scale. We're adding more people to this and create this whole culture. We realized that there is no playbook we can copy from. So therefore, we thought, how do we go about this? And what is the value for the enterprise, right, when we start about this? So what we did was we created a very simple 2x2 value maturity curve. If my analytics friends had a view, they would have made it a multi-dimensional value curve, which would have required a special visualization software for you to imagine. But for your sake, I decided to make it to maybe a 2x2 in which you can understand simple value maturity. So what are the stages, right? Stage number one, awareness. I mean, it's classical, simple. But awareness is not about data is important. Awareness is personal. Why is data important for a person who is processing applications in a bank? Why is awareness important, data awareness important for a person who is maybe processing invoices, right? So it's a personal awareness that how this can lead to drive focus in your career. Now, one of the most interesting things we did at the point of time is we called hold of one of our business leaders and said that, why don't you be the sponsor and why don't you become the first data greenbelt project which we do? And that kind of set the tone, that kind of set the aspiration for people to come and take this program. But awareness was the most important part. Now, training, we thought awareness will encourage people. Training, and once they get encouraged, they will try and get trained. Once we get trained, they'll get test. But what do you do with testing? I mean, I'm sure all of us have done millions of courses between this entire room. The reality is that we get our courses, we don't use it. 6 months down the line, we have forgotten all about it. Right? That's a classical problem we had. So our objective was not to just train people and forget about it. So therefore, the third stage became very, very important for us. So, getting to training and testing, it's not difficult for us. We have trained and tested people at scale in Genpact. We just need to find the right model for it. But the issue was, once I have trained and tested, what do I do with it? How do I make people who have now the knowledge to do projects which are relevant for them? And therefore, the next phase was project execution. Because our objective was to ensure this project execution happens at scale. It was not about 5 projects here, 10 projects here. It was about projects happening in the entire ecosystem, not controlled by a central authority, therefore generating insights for each of these specific businesses, and therefore driving the value which we're looking for. So the problem was a little bit more difficult and the scale was much large, and therefore the second stage was as people do more projects, people learn more about it, they come up with new ideas. All of that go into the fourth stage of our phase is that you generate value for your customers. And once you generate value, you generate IP. Now, on the face of it, fairly simple program, fairly simple approach. Since we had absolutely no background, we absolutely massively made a huge amount of mistakes as we started this program. But the beauty is, and what I want to do is at least share with you some of the learnings which we had as we went through this program, so that you can go back and maybe drive similar discussion with your own organization. Now, the first thing I talked about was training. No disregard to my analytics friends, but when they first gave the training content to us, I looked at it and I said, I'm an engineer, I'm an MBA from a pretty good P school. I won't do this training. I mean, this is too technical. I am not creating people to become data scientists. We don't want 100,000 data scientists to be created in Genpact. That was not the objective. We want people to be data aware, and we want to equip them to be able to generate insights for themselves, right? So therefore, the first thing was about training. We realized existing training content does not work. Because if you are suddenly asked to learn about random forest as a model without understanding what it really does for you, you'll not get insights. If you get somebody who has maybe passed from a Bachelor of Commerce, spent a few in the industry, great finance guy, and ask them to learn really regression, the person is unlikely to be very, very interested about that. So therefore, getting this curated training with live use cases, which was not very heavy, but can't be very light, most importantly, make it relevant for those people itself. Like, how would this training help a finance use case? How would this training help a supply chain use case? How would this training help a banking use case? Was step number one, and we got it wrong the first time around. It was brilliantly wrong. Hardly few takers about it when we started this. But when we did the next iteration of that, it was great. I mean, I remember, I think, and I can see Amrish at the back, I think 3 weeks later, when we are looking at, okay, so how many people have actually been trained and tested? We are expecting that if we are lucky, then we'll have 5,000 people who will enroll into it. And we would have been celebrated, we would have gone for maybe another drink. 3 weeks down the line, when we got the results, we had 20,000 people who had enrolled into the training. 20,000 in 3 weeks. Now, this was without a massive marketing push or anything. We just said, hey, you guys have been learning about Lean Six Sigma, digital for ages. Here is a training content which will make you be data aware. And bang. We had 20,000 people in 3 weeks who enrolled into this. Now, the great was, enrollment is easy. You click a button, I'm enrolled, but how do you make them come to the training? So we put the entire training into Genome, which is our self-learning platform. We did not yank 100,000 people out of their rooms into classrooms, but we made them self-paced. It was online. Our own enterprise, you can actually do that on your own. And that is how you kind of started getting adoption for that. The second thing which we had initial learning was, we had thought, now people are trained, people are also tested. They will suddenly go and create these millions of nice use cases and prediction problems which they will solve, and we will get to know about it. We approached it as true democratization. The reality was people started coming back, now I've done the training, what do I do? So what kind of project do I go after? We realized this is where you have to, distributed innovation is great, but distributed innovation is hard, right? So you have to enable the ecosystem, push it. So we said, let's look at our service lines, which are our business processes. Let's identify the top 50 problems which we have across the service lines. It was a mammoth exercise. And then let's understand how can we solve the problems through a prediction problem. And we put them as a use case. So now think yourself of a invoice processing person. I have done my training, I've done my testing. I'm wondering what to do. Now I don't have to wonder. I'll go to my Database internal website. I will go search invoice processing, and I'll see, hey, there are 7 prediction problems I can solve for. And out of the 7, maybe 2 are relevant, and 2 of them, maybe one of them I'll go after what I choose, right? So that, again, that was a journey. We didn't start on day one. What it also started, as more people started doing it, it became addictive, right? I have solved one data problem. For my entire life, I was told that somebody from analytics will come and take 6 weeks and charge a huge amount of money. No wonder, given the salaries you guys are all drawing, would be able to turn the project. In reality, you don't have to do that. You can actually deliver that in a much shorter period of time, and you can yourself do it, because if you enable the right ecosystem. Now, that was interesting. Once they started doing that, they started identifying problems on their own. So the initial 50 use cases we started off with, out of them, 25 we junked because we realized there were not enough takers to that. It was like you vote by just doing that project, you vote which projects you're going after. And 50 more use cases came in. So what we always got at any point of time, we got an insight into what kind of problems people are trying to solve. And again, that was a fascinating exercise for us. Now, again, people are now doing projects, but how would you do the projects? How would you build your models? You have data challenges, you have access issues, clients won't allow you to do that. We also, our general hypothesis was to do any kind of prediction problem, you need 10 years of data. Now, maybe that's true for facial recognition, but we are not doing facial recognition. We are trying to figure out which invoice would be paid late. We are trying to figure out which bank application process first. Now, for those, you don't need that kind of data. You need actually much lighter data set, and therefore, we went the AutoML route. We worked with a whole bunch of our providers and our clients who have their AutoML. Some of them didn't have that, so we built our own. AI Play was one of our AutoML platforms which we built. Very simple, very intuitive to use. For a business user, it meant, here is the problem I want to solve for. Here is the big why, which I want to predict. Here is the data set I want to implement. And here is what I upload. And I'll get the prediction. It's not as simple as that, but it was as close to as simple as we could make it, right? So therefore, getting this AI Play out was one of the most important things. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to drive. We know how short data scientists are in demand today. So you have to get them in some kind of an AutoML to do that, and AI Play was a fantastic option for us. And as we did this, this started becoming a factory. We started generating a whole bunch of use cases. We started generating a whole amount of value for the customers. And then today, it's a movement. It was an absolute movement. Now, what kind of value did it drive? Right? So we talked about, I'll maybe spend the last 8 minutes talking about the kind of value it drove for us and what is the future for us. So remember I talked about one of the prediction problems, right? One of the insights in the first slide about banking operations. Using the same insight, we were actually able to increase the conversion rate of loan applications from 30% to around 55%. Now, that itself was around $120 million of revenue to the customer. Once again, without any data analyst or data scientist intervention. Of course, there were coaches assigned to us for the project, but they were not doing the projects. They were being done by the operators themselves. And once they did it, they did the first one, they did the second one. Even our clients were absolutely astonished because they were thinking that, okay, here is an organization which just drives digital for us, drives transaction for us, but this is actually coming back with data from their own processes and telling them how to drive insights. And this was a classical example. For years, this client was stuck at 30%, 20 to 30% was the range. But in a very short period of time, through the power of analytics generated by the operating ecosystem, we could get to this best-in-class conversion rate. Fascinating. And there are more of such client examples like that. But see, when it was not just for clients, right? This was data literacy was not just for clients. Once you train a whole bunch of people into this, you realize they start using it in many, many different ways. So Genpact has been very, very strong on, CSR. We have a program called a Better World Initiative, in which we work with NGOs. People from my team work with NGOs to solve their problems, right? As a part of their CSR activity. Now, what we realized that people, after their training, were able to use these for running those kind of projects as well. The projects were a lot more meaningful, I would say, than loan conversion, but they were about failure of crops. Understanding how can you avoid dropout rates, right? In one of the examples, we tend to use dropout rates of people studying or children studying in school based on only a few parameters. But using now, since you have this ability in front of you, you realized when you put in 10 different factors ranging all the way from whether you have a midday meal scheme or not, what is the economic social criteria, how many times you're talking to them, we were able to predict that who are the people who are going to drop out, and therefore help and stop those dropouts from happening. Right? So absolutely, this was not an intended consequence. We wanted just people to train, and the projects which came out of it were dramatically different. Our own ESG team, we have, Genpact is a big proponent of sustainability. We focus on our carbon footprint fairly often. We realized that after we have done this training, our own team, which focused on ESG, came back and said, let us build a prediction model about the strategies we want to use to reduce our carbon footprint. Again, when we started off this, that was not a project we thought we'll conceptualize. But because we enabled people with that kind of a mindset, they started picking up projects like this. And I think that was the true power of Data Bridge. Now, in terms of kind of metrics, what it has done for us, it's a fairly impressive set of metrics. We got 1.6 million hours of training, which has been conducted to the ecosystem. We have around 55,000 people who are trained and tested into this program. We are doing hundreds of projects. Prediction problem in the ecosystem. We have made custom AI utilities on this program. So the impact has been fascinating. Industry has recognized it, whether it's IDC, Brendan Hall, Everest Group. They've actually covered it. It's exciting. And exciting because we're doing it at scale. It's exciting because you're creating real value for your customers, and it's not just a program, you are doing something and forgetting about it. So we were fairly privileged for this. What I am, and I actually will leave you with the question which I actually think, and Amresh I'm sure thinks about it every day, is that if we could do so much in just 18 months, I don't know what we'll achieve in the next 24 months. And I think that's the power of data democratization in front of people, organizations like Genpact and all of your organization. If we can do that, and scale, you'll have fantastic outcomes awaiting for you. Well, thank you so much.